of the next 40 minutes or however long we take, talking about why this is happening and the corporate structures that have caused this and the difficulties and how we address that power. The one thing I will say on this is that in terms of online abuse, the corporate power and the lack of accountability, this is part of the answer, I think, but that isn't the topic of the discussion today. So we're going to start off with talking about basically how you get set up on Mastodon very quickly, and how you move your followers across from Twitter as best you can, what you can do around cross-posting so that you're not having to cut and paste everything into both Twitter and Mastodon can make your life a little bit easier. And finally, how you can prove that the account that you've set up actually belongs to your organization. So that's going to be the first bit. We'll then talk about running your own, joining a community instance, why you might want to do that, and finally running your own instance. So starting off then, Mastodon in 10 minutes, what I hope will be 10 minutes, is a quick start guide for organizations that we're going to go through. So basically, you find a Mastodon server that probably is going to be a fairly generic one. I imagine when you start, that's a fairly sensible strategy. We'll talk about why you might want to do something different a little bit later. But wherever you sign up, the basic thing is you have to create an account. On the main page, you get a button. There you see it, create account. It's as simple as that. It's not difficult. You might get asked about some ground rules. That'll generally, particularly where it's a non-general server, you might get asked, why do you want to join this server in particular? Because they want a community of people with an interest on that server. There'll be plenty of other material which is off topic, of course, and there's no restriction on you having off topic material in your feed or talking about those things, but they want to have a little bit of community of practice as well, perhaps. So campaign.openworlds.info, which I've been using for a while, that has exactly that. In this particular case, campaign.openworlds.info, they also, which is designed for campaign organizations, one of the reasons I'm highlighting it today, it asks you to just explain why you want to join that server, which would be presumably that you are a campaigning organization and you want a presence with other campaigning organizations, and you might like to network with them a little bit more intensely by being on that server. When you sign up, you have to confirm your email. Gosh. When you have signed up, you get a menu bar on the right-hand side of your screen. I'll just talk a little bit about this. Here you have this thing at the bottom. You can see you have a preference panel. That's going to be the important thing for some of the setup. Other things you can notice, you get different views of things which are not subscribed to on the local server. That's the local view. That's just everything posted to the server. And the federated view, which is everything by anybody that server knows about. So there's a much wider views than you get on Twitter, actually. And that's one of the reasons why using a specialist server is not instantly about being in a filter bubble and being entirely restricted in your content. So in your preferences, I would just kind of say, good thing to do to start with is if you use TweetDeck back in the day, that's a good way of seeing things, everything in little columns and that you've sorted. That's called enable advanced web interface. You can enable that to kind of have a TweetDeck style view of what's going on. That's in your preferences. So once you've got set up, right, you've got the obvious thing, right? How do you move your Twitter audience across? What are you going to do with all the Twitter people who are maybe going to Mastodon and don't know that you're on Mastodon yet? Well, there are plenty of tools like this. This particular tool that I'm highlighting is one of a number. Most of them work in fairly similar ways. They're mostly linked to each other on their web pages. This one is called Debirdify, which is at debirdify.provisto.org, as it says on top of the screen. Here, what it does is it looks for the Fediverse IDs, the handles, as you can see, mine there, Jim at campaign.openworlds.info, as of yesterday. That was my handle. That was in my Twitter profile, and that allows Debirdify to find me and say, all right, Jim Killock at Twitter is actually jim@campaigns.openworlds.info. And it does that for everybody else. And as you can see in my particular case, when I checked this yesterday, it was a while since I checked, there were 630 accounts with Fediverse IDs out of my 636 6,300 odd Twitter accounts. That means that 630, about 10% of the people that I follow or follow me, I forget which it is, that follow me, that about 10% of the people who follow me are on Mastodon, have set up an account and have gone to the trouble of putting the identifier, the handle of their Mastodon account in their Twitter bio. And it's very important it's in the Twitter profile biography, because that's where Debirdify and other tools are allowed to look by Twitter. They were allowed to sort of use your Twitter login to do that. So you log in with both Twitter and Fediverse, and that kind of does the matching. So you then download, as it says, at the bottom is a link for CSV export. So there again, that shows where I've put my Mastodon handle. And this is very, very important for you as an organization to do, because once you're on Mastodon, other people will be using the same tools to find the people that they've been following or follow. And by having that handle in your biography on Twitter, you will be found by your current audience, by them as they move across. It'll also help you understand how many people that you know are moving, because your followers will tick up and you'll see whether that's a small number or a larger number. So yeah, you download that export, download CSV export for importing at Mastodon, and then in the import section, you use it for the following list, and you can add it as in that screen to your following list. Merge, obviously don't overwrite, and that adds them. And then everybody who you followed out of your previous Twitter audience will get a notification. They'll see that you're now on Mastodon, and that will encourage them to follow you back. So that gets you kind of, that's a sort of, you're getting started with your building your audience back up. You've kind of done the basic steps that you can do as far as you can do without sort of actually doing something with Mastodon. And maybe you've the next thing you need to think about perhaps is things about cross-posting, which again, you just want to reduce the amount of work you're doing. So this is again one of a number of tools. This one is called Cross-Poster, and it basically, or Mastodon Twitter Cross-Poster, again, addressed in the title bar there. Here again, you log in with both Twitter and Mastodon, and it then allows you to post from one to the other. And it gives you lots of options around that. So here, I've decided that I'm posting from Mastodon to Twitter, because that's where I'm doing most of my personal comments now. And I've also set up advanced options there as well. So I'll show you some of those. So there are things here, if you've made a tweet or a poster unsearchable, you can either choose to push them across or not. Same with private messages. Probably don't want to do those. The other things, boost, that's to say like a retweet. I would advise against posting retweets or boosts either way. It looks messy because it has all these links and things that people don't necessarily understand. Similarly, replies, they don't make a lot of sense posting them across, I don't think. And when you're kind of mentioning someone likewise, I think that makes no sense. So I would leave all of those off. what I also do is I use a tag in this tool, hash XP, for cross posts that I want, which means that I choose when I cross post or when I don't. Because, you know, if I post a long post to Mastodon, that's not going to fit in a tweet, so it's not worth posting that. So I'm quite conscious of when I'm cross posting and when I'm not. And again, I think that is the more sensible thing to do. So that's some basics then. So we've got through picking up your audience, picking up, setting up cross posting. It's all very, very easy. The next thing I think is worth thinking about is making sure you can prove who you are. Now, this is definitely something which people are going to kind of think, well, look, you've got all these servers, and I've got my handle at this Mastodon server. What's to stop somebody else setting up something that looks exactly like me with exactly the same handle somewhere else? And the answer is, of course, well, that's abuse of rules, it's impersonation, and the moderators should take care of that if you report them. But either way, you want to make sure that you are quite clearly who you say you are, and there are tools on Mastodon for you to do that. So what you do is you verify that you are in control of a web page relating to you or your organization. You can do that by pressing Edit Profile. This takes you to, among other things, this little thing about the profile links, which you can add. And on the right-hand side, it says a verification link. And it basically uses a little bit of HTML rel equals me to show that this is you. So you link back to your actual profile on Mastodon with that, and then that kind of proves that it is you that's in control of both this putting up the link and the web page with the link back to this page. That proves that you are able to edit that page, and it is therefore you. So here's my biography on Open Rights Group, and at the bottom there's a link to Mastodon, and as you can see there, it is linking back to my Fediverse ID, and that server sees that link is there and says, right, okay, he's added the link here, he's got the ID on that page, so that is who this is. So that's setting up and showing how you should prove your organization is in control of the account. Next, just a quick tip about actually getting on with content. Finding people on the Fediverse is a little bit harder than on Twitter because it isn't a huge, massive database of everything with search tools across all content. What it does allow for is content searches against hashtags. Those hashtags can be in your bio, or they can be just in the search. And lots of people use hashtags to talk about particular topics, pretty much as they do on Twitter, but more so because people have begun to forget about them on Twitter. It's become less used because the keyword searches give you more or less the same results. People have tended to just use keyword searches. Mastodon's deliberately not done that because it's been used as a sort of way for people to find people to harass who didn't necessarily want a public conversation on a topic. So really, if you use a Mastodon, you're making your post available to the public and you're kind of asking to be part of a conversation. That's the point. So you're opting into that conversation. So as you start to post to Mastodon, it's very important to use hashtags, ones that have either been commonly used on Twitter and people recognize and use themselves, or ones that are already being used on Mastodon. And there's a few there which I've spotted being used quite a lot in the last few weeks. Things like climate change, Brexit, privacy, Twitter migration, Mastodon, also BIPOC and Black Mastodon are also well used sort of topic hashtags. So there are plenty more of these, and once a couple of your organizations are using a hashtag, other people will start to get in on that conversation too, very much as they used to on Twitter. A couple of other things to remember. From an accessibility point of view, it's better if you put these at the end of your post, because if a text reader is reading it, it will say, reading that book, it'll be saying hashtag climate change, hashtag Brexit, hashtag privacy, and so on. That's pretty annoying. So it's good for that to be at the end. Likewise, camel case allows readers to understand that there are two words in a thing, not one. So that's also important. Use camel case for accessibility. And you can also now pin hashtags in the interface so you can follow a particular conversation. But in terms of picking up followers, picking up your audience, this is key. And I think a lot of people who started on Mastodon are kind of thinking, well, it's quiet around here. How do I get in on things? And what exactly is going on? Well, it's not knowing about this, not using hashtags. That's really the issue for them. Okay, I'm going to stop there. That's the whistle stop tour. So if there's any kind of immediate questions on those very basic steps, then we can reflect on those now.
Yeah, we had a few questions. The first one was, how can we see content on other specific servers of our choice? For instance, my account is on mastodon.social, and I would like to see on my timeline content from another server.
So you can either use a tool, you can either use something other than Mastodon, which does that out of the box and just follows whole instances. Obviously, that's a bit of a tough thing to say to somebody who's just starting. The other is just follow people on that instance. I'm following a lot of people from one of the InfoSec instances. I'm following, I don't know, half a dozen people on that. And the result is that they're, boosting or retweeting content from those discussions. So I'm suddenly seeing a huge amount of content from the InfoSec server, despite having, not being on it at all. So that's one technique. And the other is what are all those people using as a hashtag? Well, use the hashtags that they're using. Those are the two ways to find that content.
Another question was about how to join servers. Deborah Mason said there's a green one and an art one, but I can't find a way to join them. She's aware of them through hashtag searches, but doesn't know how to join.
Just go to the top level URL and you should be able to join at the top level URL. So if it is mastodon.green, for instance, then just go to mastodon.green, and the login screen that I had at the beginning, this one, that should show you a page like that, mastodon.green, which should show you a page like that. And on the right-hand side, it should say create account. If it's closed to new registrations, it will generally push you back to join Mastodon to help you find other servers.
And then another question was, if I published a tweet through a scheduling platform like Sprout Social, would that go to Mastodon as well? So
long as you are using the cross-poster tool, I can't see why it wouldn't. I mean, all it's doing is looking at your timeline and copying it across.
And Kirsty asks, can you see what server other people are on?
Yes, you can. So in fact, this is necessary. So for instance, Open Rights Group now has its own instance for our official account and our staff accounts where staff want to do that. So you'll see in my handle @jim@social.openrightsgroup.org. And that tells you which server you're on. And additionally, in order for you to sort of follow me from another server, you need to know the server I'm on. So you need the full address. So again, looking back at the handles that we put onto Twitter, you can see there Jim at the domain that I'm on. In this case, I was at campaign.openworlds.info. And that's how you find me from, say, Mastodon. .social, for instance.
Great. And then one more before we move on to the next part, and we'll continue to get to these questions either through staff typing an answer or at the end. But one last question was, can you see what server other people are on? Oh no, that's one we already answered. Let's see. One last question. How easy is it to change the server or instance once you have an account?
Well, funny you should ask. That's going to come up. In fact, it's very easy. To understand how easy this is, I did it myself yesterday. And I must admit to being slightly worried as I did it. It's like, is this really going to work? But it did without any problem. And that's, it proved to be a lot easier than you might imagine. I'll talk a bit about that later. I think in the next section.
All right, great. Thanks, Jim. And we can go ahead and move forward with that.
Okay, so this second part of the talk is just about why you might want to join a community instance rather than one of the big servers. I think the sort of assumption everyone comes in is, well, surely big is better and I find more people and more content on the large servers. Well, that's true, but there's so much content that the kind of Fediverse feed and the home feed are just some huge pile of stuff, 6 million people in real time posting stuff. It's not very helpful. So I'm going to take you through a little bit about why you might want to join a community server. So community servers, that's to say a smaller instance with, say, 2,000, 5,000, maybe 10,000 users. They help create a sense of community among the people who are using that server. If there's a sort of commonality of interest, it'll help promote more relevant content to each other. So that's part of the benefit, but they're also easier to moderate, and it's easier for you to know the moderators. And if you're doing something slightly controversial, or if you have attracted the attention of trolls and people who basically want to cause you trouble, that is easier for them to do on a larger server. And I've seen a few instances in the last few weeks where people with maybe 100 or 200,000 followers have gone to a very large server, and within minutes, the people who are used to causing them trouble on Twitter have reported them for all kinds of nonsense on those servers, and their accounts have been blocked by moderators for because they've been accused of doing deeply illegal things, for instance. That's not a situation you necessarily want to be in. So if you do have a sort of section of audience who are just unpleasant and hostile, I would say being on a community server is going to be a very important thing for you to do, not least because it means you can know the moderators. You can explain to the moderators who you are. If they understand a bit about you already, that's even better. And of course, it gives you, as I say, better content. Also, community servers at this point are, that's to say, instances in Mastodon language. Community servers are less likely to be overwhelmed in these periods of very high growth. On the big servers, tens of thousands of people are signing up a week, and the sort of server load of processing all of that is causing them to be quite slow at times. And that's not going to be the case with smaller servers, not as often anyway, because usually the administrators are conscious that they need to provide good service to the people on those servers. You do, however, need to be confident that these are going to stay up for a while. And so I would sign up to servers which have stated clearly that they're going to give you notice if they ever do decide to shut down. A few here that I think do seem to have a reasonably good reputation. I've noticed, I mean, there are many, many more, but I've tried to select a handful that are interesting from a campaigner point of view, Mastodon.green, which does ask for a payment. That's not a bad thing. Then there's campaign.openworlds.info, which is open to organizations like this for free. EUpolicy.social for the Brussels bubble. There's toot.bike for UK and EU cyclists, and econtwitter.net, which for economic interested people and organizations. So let's just look at what this looks like from point of view actually moving from one server to another. Let's imagine you've signed up on a generic server and now you want to be on a slightly more specialist one for any of those reasons. Again, back in preferences, you get this dialog which allows you to export your following list, right? So that's the third one there, the follows list, which here is 1,500 people. It downloads it as a CSV file. That's to say, just comma separated values file, that opens normally up in a spreadsheet. That file then allows you to import your follows back. So that's the first thing you do, is download that. You can also download any blocks you have, any mutes, and your bookmarks. One thing you can't export at this stage is followers, because they get moved in a different way. Right, so you then, in both of your accounts, you go to in your account settings and your preferences, you configure these two dialogues. So you do these dialogues, which basically tell both servers where you're going from and where you're going to. So in the account that you're moving to, you configure it in that first, and obviously in the second. Do it the other way around. So what you do first is you tell your new account where your old account is. So you add your initial alias. So this is what I did yesterday. I added my old account, jim@campaigns.openworlds.info, to my new account at social.openrightsgroup.org. So having added the handle, now my new account knows where to look. Then go back to my old account, and I then put in my new account, so it knows where to go to. You have to enter your password sensibly enough, and then you press move followers. Now, when that's done, your account becomes a kind of archive. It doesn't get deleted. You can still export your follows, but at this point, when you press move followers, a message goes from the old server to the, I believe, goes from the old server saying to everybody, you've got to move, and this is where they're moving to. And then the servers of your followers then update automatically their information, so they know where to accept content from, so that you can continue to post your content to your followers. Now, that's a minor miracle, and this is what makes the whole system so powerful, because, wow, you're not locked in. You don't have to stay on Twitter forever. Well, maybe you do, but you certainly don't have to stay on Mastodon.social forever. You can move around. And that means you don't like something, you don't like the way the moderation is working, you don't like the level of service, whatever it happens to be, you're able to move. And that is such a huge thing. It puts you in control of the situation. You're no longer purely a product. You actually have a healthy relationship with your service provider. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Again, whistle stop tour of migration.
Thanks, Jim. So a few questions. Oliver said, I've joined my local political branch to the .scot instance It seems to be well run and is great for us currently. I'm worried though, what happens if something goes wrong and the instance is no longer available? Do we lose everything and have to start again?
Right. So this is why you should make sure that you understand what is going on with the server. Though there's absolutely valid questions, and the first thing to do is to just check what Mastodon.scot are doing. Who are they? Who runs it? It will say on the website. Most of the servers who are sensible also sign up to something called the Mastodon Server Covenant. And what that means is that they guarantee that they are doing daily backups of the data, and that if they ever decide to go to shut the service, they will give all of their users 3 months notice before that happens. So that's really what you do. You just make sure that you understand who the service is, that they're well run. I believe Mastodon.scot is well run. I mean, the community there seem quite dedicated to it. I imagine it's one of the better ones that should kind of have a decent length of service.
Another question, is there any way of proving who you are without a website to put links on?
Some people are offering these services, but it's basically the same sort of thing. So if you're a journalist, there's at least one service where they attempt to check that you're a journalist by looking at your email address and you showing them things that you've published, that sort of thing. So there are some services a little bit like that, but the sort of easy way within Mastodon is these links.
And then a question from Clive. He said, I'm at clive@mastodon.green. If I change servers and there's already an @Clive there, what happens?
Well, you just have to have a different handle at the new server. That's all.
And then one more question before we move on. Someone asked, if you cross-post from Twitter to Mastodon, can you edit the post on Mastodon? For example, to add some extra hashtags to help people find our posts?
In fact, yes, you can. Amazingly, Mastodon does allow you to edit tweets. And I guess the thing there is that their understanding of users is that they should be moderated, that it should have strong relationships with their community, and that you won't, game that. And if you imagine how editing tweets on Twitter would work, people would go in and add in the word "not" or whatever after they got everyone to agree with you or whatever. It'd just be a total mess.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Jim. I think we're ready for part 3.
Great. Okay. So this is kind of the bit which you're probably thinking, God, what? Really? Really? Would I really do this? I'm going to run through this fairly quickly. Would I really want to run my own instance? Well, if you're an organization, there's some really good reasons to think about this. It obviously is not your first step, but I want to just kind of put this in front of you because actually it's not so hard. And I know 2 UK organizations who've done this already, ourselves and the law firm AWO, who are currently helping take Facebook to court over their advertising practices, and who we work with on many data protection issues as well. So here's a few reasons why you might want to have your own instance. First is just instant and clear verification that it's who you are. Right? It's your domain, social.openrightsgroup.org. Can't be anybody else. It has to be Open Rights Group. So that's no further verification is needed that the people using that are kind of part of Open Rights Group in some way, because it increases brand recognition. You can then also choose which servers can see your posts. So, if you kind of want a slightly wider reach than some servers might feel they want to have, there's been a bit of controversy about some journalist Mastodon nodes, for instance. You can say, well, we don't mind journalists getting our content. You're not dependent on an external moderator. And as I mentioned, there can be mistakes around moderation, which can lead to quite, drastic decisions. Of course, everyone's doing their best to make sure that that's sorted out and problems are resolved, and there's good reasons why they should be, but still, as an organization, problems with moderation, whether they're on Mastodon, Facebook, Twitter, these are horrible situations to get into, and you're much less likely, basically your content might get blocked on a particular server, but it can't be blocked entirely, so you've got less of a problem in that sense. Also, backups and security, just mentioned, you're in control of those. That may be important for you. And finally, you could use an instance for your own community building. That's also an option. So if you're going to do this, I mean, if you're technically gifted or got people with technical skills, then you can set this all up yourself. But I'm going to just kind of give you some really simple things. Just say, look, there are now plenty of people who do Mastodon as software as a service. So the same way as you have Zero, or maybe you have WordPress, and you might not manage your WordPress. You might simply just be using it while somebody else sorts the technicals. Well, the same is now true of Mastodon. At the link that I've got there at the top, docs.joinmastodon.org/user/run your own. That at that there are a number of services where you can subscribe. So Mastohost has been the most popular. It's currently not open for this, but there are lots of others that are. One that appealed to me, which is quite expensive, but worth mentioning, is Ungleich. They're interesting because they have got very strong data protection policies. Being in Switzerland, they can do that, but they also are running off their own energy source, and they use recycled servers. So there are environmental benefits to using them, as well as convenience. Also, some interesting mentions. I believe Mythic Beasts are also getting in on Mastodon hosting. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes from a sort of UK perspective. I think there's going to be quite a lot of people wanting to offer these sorts of products in the next few months. Last bit, just to say, running your own community is not impossible. Here's partner organization for open rights group, Digital Courage. They've been running their own server for a while. They've got 1.6k active users that log in every month, I believe. And as you can also see there, if you read a bit of German or can guess, they ask everybody to pay €1 a month towards the costs of that server in order to make it a sustainable project. And they're doing that very successfully. I think that's interesting. Obviously, they've got their own community, and there are people who want to support them in doing that. There are a lot of worries about running any kind of system with moderation, whether it's on Facebook or Discord or anywhere else. There are ups and downs of doing this. And of course, they're exacerbated a little when you're running your own server, because there are extra sort of compliance issues. So I just listed some of those out. This is a huge discussion, and I think most of you are not necessarily going to be about to take these sorts of questions on. So it's not worth running through in detail, but just to kind of give a top level idea about community servers. You could develop a community, you can develop strong links with a membership base, and you're always going to be able to get your message out. It isn't a question of how much is Facebook paying you for advertising this month, how much reach are they willing to give you. You have that because you are managing that server. There are, however, risks that you would need to manage if you're doing this. So legal and compliance issues are not trivial, and they are doable, but they're not trivial. And that would include being able to deal with takedown requests for copyright or defamation, other such things. And also potentially online safety bill assessments might come in, depending on the shape of the bill and what Ofcom demand of people, and of course data protection requirements as well. You'd also have to make sure that you've got robust service delivery, which maybe you can mitigate through using a service somebody else is managing the software. But you'd also need to be very, put in effort on the moderation, making sure that's all fair, transparent, and robust, because that's critical to keeping communities healthy. If those sorts of things don't appeal, but you do want to kind of still have some kind of community feel and input, maybe a topic-based server with other organizations, either run in partnership with them or perhaps with volunteer groups who are taking that responsibility, those might be other ways to get similar sorts of benefit. So yeah, that's it, I think. So if you've got questions on that section or anything else, now's the time. I feel like that's gone very quickly. It certainly did for me, but perhaps it hasn't for everyone else. Perhaps you're now bored to tears. But however, I hope you're at least, if not excited by detail in my presentation, at least excited by this huge change and this sort of grassroots social media taking place, and the attempt, I think, by individuals to have some agency in the future of social media and the internet.
Thanks, Jim. And we still have several more questions and a few coming in from YouTube as well. One that just came in: what is the difference between an instance and a server?
I've been using them entirely interchangeably. I mean, basically, what I mean is something at a particular URL, so mastodon.social, for instance, versus social.openrights.group.org.
Another question: if a server is not in the Mastodon server picker, does it mean they didn't accept the Mastodon server covenant, or do all servers have to accept the covenant?
No, they don't. Anyone can set up a server, and I mean, this is something to bear in mind when you pick a server. There are some servers out there who are beyond the pale, right? There are some that are doing deeply illegal things. So you want to sign up to servers that you trust. But there are some which are designed, for instance, for Nazis and the far right to sign up to, and those sort of servers you need to block if you're running a server, or you need to be on a server that blocks them, because the way that Federation works, the way that Mastodon works in terms of keeping a healthy community, is by shutting out the people who are out to cause trouble and be obnoxious. They just keep them out. So that's a very important factor in all of this. Of course, there are further questions about what you do around radicalization, but I think the important thing to note is that a lot of those people, they swarm around those platforms anyway. They just use Twitter as a way to kind of come in and cause deep unpleasantness and ill feeling when they can. And of course, that's exactly what Musk is encouraging right now.
Another question. Marcus says, people in my organization are concerned about losing reach if we focus on Mastodon, particularly because of its federated nature. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, look, I mean, the reach of Mastodon is roughly the same as on Twitter, I would say, in terms of, can it spread or not? The problem with Mastodon in terms of the content is just that it's a smaller network. But, who knows whether that's going to be true in 2 weeks. We all have different sorts of social media account. We use at org, we use YouTube, Instagram a little bit, as well as Twitter and Facebook. And the audiences are different at each, but we don't choose one over the other. We choose all of them to reach different kinds of audience. I would say that at the moment we have about 45,000 followers on Twitter, and we have around about 3,500 followers on Mastodon, which we've picked up in 2 weeks, more or less. We've had an account there for a lot longer, but it didn't have. It only had a few hundred followers until the whole Musk thing started boiling up, and it's really picked up most of those in the last couple of weeks. But the interaction we get on Mastodon now is roughly the same level as Twitter. That's to say, an account with 10% of the followers is getting the same level of reaction as Twitter. So if we post a tweet to Twitter and to Mastodon, it will get the same number of retweets or boosts. It'll get a similar level of likes. So, ask yourself whether you're really getting the value out of Twitter that the headline numbers say. I would suggest.
Another good question is, who owns user data on a self-hosted instance, and what are my responsibilities, especially if users are across countries and continents?
So, data, personal data isn't really a kind of question, at least in a UK perspective, it's not really a question of ownership. It's a question of what rights to usage does each person have. And the individual whose data it is always has a right to that data and to have it corrected and for it to be accurate. The company has the rights that you've agreed to when you signed up for it to use. And typically those are the rights to use that data in order to run the service. Because most of these are community run projects, they're not usually making really bad claims about what they can and can't do with data, but it is down to the server and the policy they put out. And if the policy says we can do what we like and we claim all these things, and it's in a US jurisdiction, I mean, I haven't seen this, but theoretically it could be quite bad. That said, as I say, I haven't really seen the examples of people being really bad, but I think it is another good reason to kind of have some idea about who you're signing up with. Things like social.coop are a good idea from this point of view, because they're a Mastodon instance or server that's been set up to be run by its users. So things like that are quite good arrangements, I think.
Another good question. An anonymous attendee said, what is the best Android app for Mastodon that we can recommend for better accessibility features?
I am afraid I can't answer that, but I will ask on Mastodon once we're off this call, and I will post the answers that we get back to the YouTube video.
Great. And Nicole asked, is there an overarching way to find out which instances my home instance has defederated from if they don't make the list public?
Oh gosh. Well, again, if they haven't made the list public, then that's quite hard. But I would say, it's a responsibility of the people who run instances to make that information public, because for a start, it tells you what what they regard as acceptable and unacceptable, but also it tells you what risks you might be exposed to. And I think it's quite an important part of transparency to users to make sure that information is public. So if it's not, I would ask your admin to make it public. But at the end of the day, if they won't, there's not much you can do.
Another question, can you join unlimited servers?
You can, but of course your accounts will be separate. One thing that I have kind of think is worth noting, right, is if you were to set up 3 or 4 different accounts, then you could at least technically merge them back together. So while separating an account into 2 might be rather difficult, if you do have 2 accounts in 2 different places, you probably can merge them back together without too much trouble. Of course, if you start abusing that sort of thing, that's where you're going to get your account suspended. And I would just say there is a level on this. Obviously, there is a lot more freedom on a system like this, and that does kind of require peer trust and peer pressure to keep that trust. I think we probably will in this situation see some of that trust abused from time to time. There may well be instances like that. And I would just say, from that point of view, do try to sign up to servers that have sensible rules and appear to be run by sensible people and have sensible people on them. Don't just sign up to random places that somebody's just decided they're going to have a go. because it probably won't last very long. They'll get bored. It'll turn out to be too much hassle, and it probably won't be very well run in the meantime. So, just be sensible about why and who you trust to be doing this, the same as you would be sensible about who you sign up to run your email or who you'd sign up to run your website.
Exactly. Another question from Nicole. They asked, can that REL equals ME link be anywhere on a website?
Yeah, it has to be on the page that you are linking to from the Mastodon account in order for it to pick that up, that you've put that information in.
And Julia asks, I'm working for an animal welfare organization. I haven't found any server yet that would be fitting. Do you know of any?
Off the top of my head, no. But I mean, obviously, maybe Mastodon.green would be a kind of possibility. There are lots focused on climate change, which is, I guess, allied. But I would be very surprised if there was not an instance that focuses on that topic.
A question from Georgia. They said, in terms of using different servers, are you worried about the echo chamber? As in, would people outside of it be able to also see your posts?
Yeah, I mean, this is a thing. Your posts, so long as somebody on another server is following you, your posts can be found on that server. So, Open Rights Group has its own server. We're not worried about that content not being elsewhere, because there are several thousand people following us, and that will mean that content is getting broadcast to more or less every other server. The only way that it gets found is through either people circulating it and retweeting it, or through searches against hashtags. What that means is that it's users who are choosing to promote the content. And perhaps this is the most important thing about Mastodon as it currently stands. Mastodon and other services, they can change, and they can. The only thing that's constant really is that they use this thing called ActivityPub, which allows the different servers to talk to each other and post your content. But Mastodon specifically has been designed to depend entirely on users to promote content. And that means by boosting, that's to say, like retweeting. So somebody on Mastodon retweets something, it actually gets reposted to all of the people that follow them, not just who Twitter thinks might look at it, everybody. And that means that if content is useful, it will actually quite often circulate for days and days. So you see the same things pop up repeatedly, and it's kind of like, oh, right, okay, that's funny. Oh, that's good. That person spotted that. And that means that you are the algorithm. So if you're contributing and you want to push things out, you want your followers to push things out, tell them. I mean, in some ways, we're back to, with Mastodon, the affordances are very like Twitter of around 2008 to 10, which is why I think so many people have gone there. It's better in that people have longer posts, and they're calmer, and they a bit more reflective, because if you've got more space, you don't kind of just react so quickly. You kind of try and write a bit more sensibly. But also, because it's not all about gaming the algorithm, you're not trying to sort of, find the thing that triggers the algorithm and makes Twitter explode and makes everyone click. What you're trying to do is to persuade other people what you're saying is valuable. And because it's valuable, they promote it. So that puts people in charge. And I think, again, that's a lot of the reason why the atmosphere there is a lot better.
And a good note from the audience, Mark says, I'm using FetaLab for Android. I've tried several apps and think it's the best I've found. So just a good answer to a previous question about Android compatibility. But another question from an anonymous attendee, is the algorithm similar on Mastodon to Twitter? They said on Twitter, it's good practice to post a certain amount of times per day and make threads. Just similar practices seem to be working on Mastodon at the moment.
Well, so there is no algorithm, right? The people are the algorithm. And again, this is maybe why subject nodes help, because a community of people see good content, they're experts in their field, they push the content out, that gets out to their followers on other servers. So the people are the algorithm, and the servers with collects of specialists and of interests are helping choose the content that gets really pushed. All of this serves to say, the way that you get results on Mastodon is by being good, by producing good content that people want, that people believe is true and worth sharing. So, get back to your roots. Think about why this matters to people and how you communicate to people that things need doing, that things need acting on, and stop worrying about the algorithm and the Twitter algorithm police.
Another question: what server would you recommend for organizations focused on whistleblower protection? They said they haven't seen any on the list of servers currently available for signups.
Well, I mean, I think I would say something like, if just a sort of generic campaigns one might work. So the campaigns.openworlds.info might work. I think also some of the ones focused on journalism might also be interesting, to look at. There are several of those. So whether you think this is more about kind of journalism or more about organizations, you've at least got those, I think, to think about.
Could you give a short breakdown on analytics on Mastodon?
Yeah, I can be very, very, very comprehensive on this. It's nearly impossible. Now, that, of course, is going to take some of you aback. But there isn't tracking on this service. It is not designed for advertisers, and it is not designed for people to be tracking users and matching them up to everything. And mostly it's designed to stop all that. It's designed to give you a kind of slightly more private kind of experience. So if you don't list a post, it doesn't get searched. It doesn't get found by people other than those you sent it to. You can choose to delist your information from searches entirely. There's lots of things you can do to stop people from finding your content if you don't want to. There's lots of things you can do to block users that don't want, semi-permanently or permanently. Same with instances. You can also add content warnings to people as well as to posts. So if you think somebody's constantly posting something and you want a warning, they're not providing it, you can add one to the content from that particular server or person. There's a lot of things you can do to control content from your own point of view. But in terms of analytics, you're going to see how many people have liked a post and how many people have boosted the post. But that's it. And again, you might think, oh my God, how are we going to live in a world where we've only got 2 metrics to go on? Well, actually, that's probably right. That's probably how it should be. We probably shouldn't know everything about everybody all of the time and expect that information to just be kind of given to us on a plate. Maybe the reason that information was available is because the companies are trying to tempt everybody into spending money with them and to persuade advertisers of their relevance and value. But actually, ethically, it probably isn't right to be doing that.
Campaigns.openworld seems to be full. Are there any similar alternatives?
It's not full. You have to apply. I'll double check that, but it should be open to applications. If it's not, I'll make sure it is.
Yeah, we can follow up on that. Another question: would you be able to point to any server sizing guidance? I couldn't find any in the documentation.
So what do we mean by server size guidance? I mean, I suppose probably, if I was going to, what I would say is, right, the smallest, if servers have got 50 users, then the amount of traffic on that is going to be quite small, and the effort required to maintain and grow that server may not be very, may not lead to it surviving for a long time. If a server has got, like Mastodon.social, if it's got 200,000 users, then managing that community is more or less impossible. So the risks of sort of people gaming it, trying things on, misreporting users because they think it's a lark, or they are simply just trying to do damage to somebody, right? That sort of behavior is going to take place more often on a server with 200,000 people, the same way as it happens on Facebook and Twitter. If it seems that there's a sort of sweet spot around sort of 2,000 to 5,000 users, where there's a strong sense of community, there's the full reach into the whole network, but the moderators are not overwhelmed and they're capable of managing those communities. I think once it kind of gets north of 20 or 30,000, those questions start to get harder and harder. So I think if you're kind of looking for an optimal number of users, I would say, well, start at around probably in the sort of 500 to 5,000 mark.
A follow-up from the same user that might give more context. They asked, how big of a server do I need to host, say, 100 accounts?
Oh, so processing size of server. Well, some of the Mastodon as a service providers give guides to this. They give kind of server size recommendations for storage space and processor power. But I think they're probably a better place to get that answer.
Great, thank you, Jim. I think we have to draw the questions to a close now, but we will try to get through all of these and post them later. I wanted to see if you have any closing remarks, and also if James, our campaign manager, has anything he'd like to add.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Abigail. I hope everyone's enjoyed that. I've really enjoyed listening to Jim and some of the questions there. What we'll do in terms of the questions, we weren't able to get through all of them. I'm sure we'll have a look through. Jim might try and answer some on Mastodon. But what we'll do also, we'll do a follow-up email from this event, all of you who registered for it, and we'll try and put in some further information, some of the slides that are linked to the YouTube video where you can kind of watch the session again. So hopefully you'll find that useful. In the meantime, if you have enjoyed this session and you want to find more about the organisation, please do take a look at our website, openrightsgroup.org. Follow us on Mastodon and on our social media channels on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook as well. So I hope you've enjoyed the session and got a lot out of it. And we look forward to seeing you at some of our future events.
Thank you very much. And just to kind of, from my side, just say, great questions, really interesting. I hope you'll give it a go. I hope it's all been useful. Where we want to go next, I think, is to start talking about why we're in this situation, why it is that a monopoly can simply start misbehaving and wrecking people's work of years and decades, and what it is that actually the law should do about that. It's obviously hard to stop businesses going bust, but there are other things that we can do. As I mentioned before, that the real answer is what Mastodon does today, which is interoperability, so that different networks can talk to each other. If I tried telling you that 3 months ago, I used to tell people this, and there'd be a sort of like, sometimes there'd be a kind of like, oh yeah, okay, that can work. It's just as often there'd be a blank expression. But either way, people just kind of thought, well, that's never going to happen, is it? But now, today, we have announcements from Tumblr that they're going to adopt this standard. So Mastodon and Tumblr will talk to each other, and people will be able to read accounts across both of those in the future. And Flickr is considering doing the same. So potentially Flickr, Tumblr, Mastodon, and a whole other set of services which exist out there, which you'll all start to find out about. All these will talk to each other, which begs the question, why doesn't Facebook and Twitter talk to all these services if everybody else is capable of doing it? And do we have to live trapped in these world gardens? And of course, I think from Open Rights Group's point of view, we firmly believe that people do not have to be trapped by billionaire oligarchs and the like. So while this today has been very much about the practicalities of getting started and trying to understand what the network's about, I think the learning journey we're going to have next is about why this matters in a wider context, what it is that we do about Twitter, whatever happens to it. And also, we'll also be learning a little bit about what happens when technology is put in the hands of people. That won't all be good, of course. There will be downsides as well as upsides. But, there is some really interesting conversations there.